All right, strap yourself in, everybody. Here is author, former pro soccer star, and heartthrob, Rasmus Ankersen. It's great to meet you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thanks very much for that introduction. So 2 years ago, I sat back in my flat in London where I live today, and I was watching this. Tunis Dibaba, a 26-year-old woman, winning the 10,000 meter gold at the London 2012 Olympics, and that was her third Olympic gold medal in just 4 years. Less than 24 hours later, this woman, Gilana, wins the Olympic marathon and also breaks the Olympic marathon record. And the day after she's done that, this guy, Bekele, wins the bronze on the 10,000 meter men, and his brother, Kenin Isa Bekele, comes here, who's a 3 times Olympic gold medalist and a world record holder. He came 4th in that race. And all this happened within just 3 days in London. And as you can see, every single one of those 4 athletes come from Ethiopia. Does that surprise you? Probably not. We're kind of familiar with the fact that the best middle and long distance runners in the world tend to come from East Africa. But here's the fascinating thing. When I put the names of these 4 athletes into Google, something really interesting came up. These 4 athletes do not just come from Ethiopia. Every single one of them come from the same village in Ethiopia. Bekoji, a tiny village in the middle of nowhere with 17,000 people. And this village has, over the past 15 years, produced athletes that won 10 Olympic gold medals, broken 10 world records, and won 32 world championships. You can try and ask yourself, what are the chances that this happens in a village with 17,000 people? So guys, this is the type of place that if you win the Tuesday morning training session, you're the fastest man on the planet. That's pretty cool. That's a pretty cool place. So I got very curious, and for the next 2 months, I was studying the best athletes in the world. And then I realized that Bekoji is not an exception. It will probably not surprise you that the best sprinters in the world come from Jamaica. But did you know that the vast majority of them actually come from the same athletic club in Kingston, Jamaica? 35% of the world's 100 best female golfers come from the same area around Seoul in South Korea. And up north Sweden, there's a tiny village in the mountains with 500 inhabitants, and they produce some of the best alpine skiers in the history. So I'm sure you're thinking the same thing as I thought when I first heard about these gold mines of talent. Because what's their secret? And maybe more interestingly, what can they teach us about developing talent? So in my pursuit to answer those questions, here's what I did.
Look, if you had one shot, or one opportunity to seize everything you ever wanted in one moment, did you capture it? Or just let it slip? Yo. His palms are sweaty, knees weak, arms are heavy. There's vomit on his sweater already. Mom's spaghetti, he's nervous, but on the surface he looks calm and ready to drop bombs. But he keeps on forgetting what he wrote down. The whole crowd goes so loud, he opens his mouth, but the words won't come out. He's choking how? Everybody's joking now. The clock's run out, time's up, over, plow. Snap back to reality. Oh, there goes gravity. Oh, there goes gravity. Choke. He's so mad, but he won't give up. Daddies, he know he won't have it. He knows his whole back to these ropes. It don't matter, he's dope. He knows that, but he's broke. He's so stagnant, he knows when he goes back to this mobile home. That's when it's back to the lab again, yo. This old rhapsody better go capture this moment and hope it don't do it. Lose his health in the music, the moment you own it.
6 months, I basically traveled around the world and lived and trained in these gold mines. I didn't just do the research back from my desk. I don't know if you can spot the slow white boy on the picture here. But this is me getting my Danish ego destroyed at a morning training session in Bekoji in Ethiopia. So I came back and I wrote this book called The Gold Mine Effect, which is published in most of the world today, about my experiences. And this is how my expedition looked like. Today I'm going to take you guys on a journey, be your travel guide, and try and take you into the gold mines to see what they can learn, teach us about developing talent. And I'm going to start the journey by taking you a bit back in time. I'm going to take you back to the 1968 to the Olympics in Mexico City. What you see on the video here is the Kenyan runner Kip Keino winning the 1500-meter gold by out-sprinting the American favorite and world record holder Jim Ryan. And Kip Keino's victory in Mexico City was interesting in a couple of ways. First of all, Kip won this race suffering from a gallbladder infection, which is incredibly painful. So that was impressive in itself. But also, Kip's victory indicated the start of an era of Kenyan dominance in middle and long distance running. Ever since that day, in 1968, the Kenyan runners have been almost unbeatable. And the funny thing is that Kip Keino and almost every single one of these top Kenyan athletes, they come from the same area in Kenya, something called the Rift Valley, which is an area approximately the size of Massachusetts in the US, and it accounts for 12% of the Kenyan population. And this is where the Kalenjin people live. And just to give you a flavor for the dominance of the Kalenjin people, so since 1968, every single Olympic gold medal won on the 3,000-meter steeplechase have been won by a runner from this area. Here's another fact. 17 American men in history have run under 2 hours and 20 minutes on the marathon. 32 Kalenjin runners ran under 2 hours and 20 minutes on the marathon last October. This is the biggest concentration of elite athletes ever. So I had to go there, and I arrived in January 2010 to Eldoret Airport. This is about 3,000 meters above sea level, so it's high altitude. And about 30 minutes drive from Eldoret Airport is a small village called Itan. And this is where the Kalenjin people live and train. And you're not going to spend a lot of time in Itan to understand that this is the world's epicenter of running. Everybody runs. The kids run to school. The elders run to market. The youngsters, they train 3 times per day at the dirt roads around the city to become as good as they can get. So everywhere you go, you hear this sound of feet explosively touching the ground. It sounds like this. So obviously people have come up with lots of explanations for why the Kenyan runners are so good. And some of them is about the genes, some of them is about the lifestyle, the diet, the practice. But I'd like to give you another perspective to that discussion today. And I would like to introduce you to the godfather of Kenyan running. So this is a guy called Colm O'Connell. And Colm O'Connell is today the most successful coach of middle and long distance runners ever. And actually, he grew up in Ireland. And in 1976, he came to Itan in Kenya, not as a running coach, but as a geography teacher to teach at a boarding school in Itan. And Colm O'Connell ended up as the most successful coach of long-distance runners in the history. And you may think, how can that happen for an Irish geography teacher? But interestingly, in every single one of the gold mines I visited, I saw and I met an equivalent of the Irish geography teacher. In Jamaica, the famous sprinting coach, Stephen Francis, who you're going to meet in a bit, he never sprinted. He was a statistician. In Korea, one of the most successful golf coaches, Won Park, was actually an environmental activist fighting against the establishment of golf courses until he fell in love with the game and became a running coach. So lots of these guys actually didn't come from the inside, but they came from the outside. And that's kind of counterintuitive, because we tend to believe that the breakthroughs in a field come from people who know the most about that particular field. But actually my research challenges that. Maybe sometimes innovation doesn't come from the inside, but from the outside. And I remember Colm O'Connell, he said this to me. He said, I've taken the steps to understand what most running coaches know by coming from the inside, but I don't think they've taken the steps to understand what I know from coming from the outside. So there's this outsider intelligence that sometimes the ones that know the least can actually be the ones that know the most. And I think it's a strong argument for inspiring collaboration in organizations, breaking down silos, and really encouraging outside thinking if we want to drive innovation. That was my first lessons from the gold mines. So we got to move on, and I'm going to take you to a more exotic destination now. I'm going to take you to Jamaica. You probably know this guy, Usain Bolt, the fastest man on the planet. In 2008, he broke the world record, and the world was shocked because sprinting hadn't developed for 50 years. And here comes this massive Jamaican dude and cut 0.2 seconds off the world record. And people came up with all these kind of explanations. Why is he so good? Why are the Jamaican sprinters so good? And I'm sure you heard some of the explanations. People tend to say there must be something in the water in Jamaica. And these guys obviously have a sprinting gene. It's been dished out to them on an exclusive basis, and that's the secret. So I spent a lot of time with the leading scientists on this topic, and they spent the past 30 years trying to identify the Jamaican sprinting gene. And the problem is, they haven't really found it yet. There's very little evidence for specific races in the world being in possession of specific high-performance genes. That doesn't mean that genetics don't matter, because if Usain Bolt's mom had sent him to chess when he was 5 years old instead of sprint, I'm not sure we've got the same result. There is a genetic factor, but there's very little evidence for what we call a race-linked genetic advantage. Another explanation people use to judge the Jamaican sprinting success is seriously this. Are you ready? The yam potato. The yam potato grows naturally in Jamaica. There's a lot of protein in it, and apparently Usain Bolt ate a lot of yam potatoes when he was a small kid. People think that must be the secret, a magic potato. I've been in Kingston. One of the first things I had to do was to test that potato. And I can tell you, it forced me to the restrooms a couple of times, but it definitely didn't increase my top speed with a single second. There's no magic potatoes, there's no super genes, so what's the secret? And this was where I realized that the vast majority of those top sprinters came from the same athletic club in Kingston, something called MVP Track and Field Club. And I had to go there. I arrived to MVP Track and Field Club's training ground at the outskirts of Kingston, 5:30 in the morning. This is what I saw. I looked around, and the first thing I thought was, where the hell is the running track? All I saw was a big grass field. You know, where I come from, a running track is red. Okay? I saw a big grass field. I told my taxi driver, please wait here for 10 minutes because you just drove me to the wrong address. 10 minutes later, it is getting even more strange because then this guy arrives to the training ground. So anyone want to guess who's this? So I'd like to welcome Mr. Stephen Francis. Ladies and gentlemen, this is without a doubt the world's most successful sprint coach, head coach in MVP Track and Field Club in Jamaica. You can forget Bob Marley. This is the real Jamaican hero. His sprinters won almost as many medals on the sprint distance in 2008 at the Olympics as the whole US did. And as you can see, Mr. Francis doesn't really look like a sprinter. So he looks like a sumo wrestler. And the truth is, the guy never sprinted. He graduated in statistics at the University of Michigan. And coming back to Jamaica, he founded MVP Track and Field Club. And picking his brain is really interesting because he has a lot of interesting ideas about how to build a high performance, a talent environment. And one of them is about the facilities. So I came out there 5:30 in the morning. I expected to see a top modern training facility with spa treatments and reggae music coming out of the loudspeakers. All I saw was a decent Scotch grass track and a gym back from the Jane Fonda days with rusty weights. So I told Francis, my friend, I said, oh, you train the best athletes in the world. Why are you not building a proper running track? Here's what he told me.
Most of the time I see performance centers in Australia, in Britain, in Sweden, and wherever else. And I'm there saying, well, these guys, obviously the emphasis for them to be comfortable. I believe that strongly that, you know, if a performance center must be designed with work in mind and not with comfort.
So a performance center should not be designed for comfort, but for hard work. That's what he says. So he says, I have all you need to become a world-class sprinter. All you need is here. But I also want something that kind of tests people, gives me the answer to what I believe is the most important question: who wants it most? Because if you're driven by comfort and glamour, you will never go here. But if you really want to improve, do better today than you did yesterday, there's nowhere else you want to be than an MVP track and field club. So if you make life too easy for people, you never get to see who really wants it the most. And it's interesting, I sometimes ask people, can you have too much comfort and too little improvement? And I think you can easily see what this gym in San Diego is designed for. So am I saying that now you guys got to go back to headquarters and you got to downgrade facilities, and next year Idea City is not going to be here but in a rusty basement, and that's not what I'm talking about. But I'm trying to question what's the perfect conditions for high performance really? What's the perfect conditions for innovation? I don't think that necessarily when you have all the time you need, all the resources, the best facilities. Sometimes it's actually the opposite. So a very interesting woman I came across a few years ago is a woman called Tina Selig. And she wrote a very interesting book about creativity, and she teaches creativity at Stanford University. And the first day her new students come into class every year, she always gets them to play Scrabble. And after about 10 minutes, she always starts to change the rules. So sometimes she makes the game harder by tightening the rules, so she gives them less time, less words, and less letters to work with. Sometimes she does the opposite, so she makes the game easier. She loosens the rules. She gives them more time, more words, more letters. And the funny thing is that all the students, they cheer when she makes the game easier, when she loosens the rules, and they complain when she tightens the rules. But the fact is, they produce significantly more points when she tightens the rules than when she loosens the rules, because that constraint forced them into a creative mindset where they had to come up with unconventional solutions to the problems. So the constraint inspired creativity. I believe that's the same in business. Lots of competitive edges in business are born from constraints and scarcity. Let me give you an example. Southwest Airlines, the most profitable airline company in the history. Southwest Airlines is world known because they turn around a plane faster than everybody else. It takes 10 to 12 minutes from a Southwest Airlines plane, hit the gate, passengers out, new passengers in, until it leaves the gate. That's a real competitive edge, because if a plane spends less time on the ground and more time in the air, you have a better business. That makes sense. How do you think they came up with that, this innovation? Do you think they sat in the boardroom with coffee and cookies and thought, this is going to be our edge? That's not how it happened. They were almost bankrupt. They were so close to being bankrupt, they had to sell one plane off just to survive. They had 4 planes in the fleet, sold one off, they had 3 planes left, and then had to ask themselves, can we actually fly the original schedule with 3 planes instead of 4 planes? If so, we got to turn around a plane faster than everybody else and find a way to do that. And that's what they did. So the constraint and the scarcity forced them to ask themselves a question that would otherwise never have been asked if they would have had all the time and all the resources they needed, or they thought they needed. The same with mobile payment. Where do you think the innovation for mobile payment happens today? It happens in Africa, in Kenya. Why does that not happen in one of the big economies? Because Kenya has scarcity. They don't have the infrastructure with online banking where we can transfer money that we have. So they have to ask themselves, can we actually get the same effect by people using the most simple mobile phone, like a Nokia 3210 that most people have access to in Kenya? So again, the scarcity forced them to ask themselves a question that would otherwise never have been asked, and that's where the innovation came from. That's why I believe that the best leaders, if they know that if the outside world does not give them constraint, they make some up themselves. I think, for example, Steve Jobs was a master of that. He didn't tell his designers, go make a phone that people like. He said, go make a phone that people love, but it can only have one button. That was revolutionary. Not 2 or 3, one button. And when he asked his design team to do the iPod, he said, go from idea to market in 8 months, not longer. You cannot reach that target by doing business as usual. And I think that's the trick with constraints and scarcity. You can't do business as usual, and that's where the innovation comes from. So we've been around the world today. We met Stephen Francis in Jamaica, Colm O'Connell in Kenya, the godfathers of the gold mines. And we met some of the world's best athletes. And people always tend to tell me when I speak about the gold mines, well, as I said, there must be something in the water. These guys have a special gene. But actually, I found the opposite. I kind of loved this quote from T.S. Eliot, and I want to finish with that. And he famously said, the great atheists didn't contain more talent, but they wasted less. Building a gold mine is about wasting less talent, and I hope I've shared some interesting ideas with you today about how to waste less talent. Thank you very much for listening. Thank you. Thank you.